Welcome back to another Wednesday Live training. Every Wednesday I go live talking about all things marriage, family, mindset, wealth, health, because it's all related. When you want to build an unshakable marriage and deeper connection with your kids and be an elite husband and father, it all matters. There's no such thing as work-life balance. You got to have it all. You got to be an integrated male. And so one of the things I want to talk about this week, stemming off the first series of this 6-part series, is how do we maintain more control? How do we control the narrative in our relationships? And I don't want to say manipulate because that's a harsh word, but really, how do we have power, control, authority? How are we able to enroll our spouses in our ideas and control the narrative? There's so many times in my relationship where I felt like I didn't have any power. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't express myself. I just acquiesced. I was the nice guy. I did whatever she said. And honestly, that got me nowhere. I've talked about it a lot. My story, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Joel Evan. I'm a best-selling author. I'm a coach. I was a first responder for 15 years. And my marriage suffered for a good 10 years out of the 15 years that I've known my wife. And 10 years was not good because I didn't have the skills. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a blueprint. And what I've really come to this realization is that fatherhood is a skill, marriage is a skill. And when you're around a community that can help uplift you, challenge you, support you to get better, everything is possible. I've seen it in my own life. I've seen it in the men that I coach and work with. And so if you're interested, you want to jump in and you want to get started with me and be part of my team, simply reach out, DM me, comment below, and I will send you the details and we'll get you rocking and rolling. I've got several free guides and resources. So wherever you're at in your journey, I know I can help you. And that's what I'm really passionate about because I've seen the detriments of when you can't fix your relationship at the worst spectrum of all of this. I see men take their own life, and that just breaks my heart because that means that man belongs to a mother, or worse, their kids don't get to see their dad anymore because of the decisions and the fright and the fear that he was in, and he didn't know how to get out of it. And I wish I could have reached him and taught him the skills that I'm teaching you guys for free here today, that I do every freaking Wednesday, because I'm that passionate about not only the mental health, but just making you a better man. Because when you're a better man, you actually impact generations, and the legacy of your last name continues on and on and on. Now, last week we talked about this is a 6-part series about controlling the narrative and being able to be a better or master communicator, and why a lot of us men fail in this element. Now, the first thing we talked about is you have to master your inner frame. I can give you all the tips and strategies. And by the way, when we get into next week's module or series of this evolution, things are going to ramp up. You're going to get some really good tactics and techniques, but I've got to build you up first. There's got to be a foundation. And if you don't have a foundation, I don't care what I tell you, it isn't going to matter because you haven't mastered your inner frame, who you are. And so you're just going to, basically, you're faking it till you make it, and that ain't going to work. Now, this part 2 of this is we're going to talk about negative emotions that tend to get in the way, that prevent you from winning a lot of arguments or just being able to control the narrative in general, right? So there's 5 big negative emotions that we're going to talk about. And what we see over and over again is that these negative emotions, they tend to creep up to the surface, and they will create a lot of static, a lot of background noise, and sabotage you, especially in arguments or heated confrontations. And they usually reappear often and sabotage you from being in your power zone, right? You not being able to live in your arena. And that means your partner is now controlling the scenario. And we see a lot of this, like I mentioned, in that nice guy archetype, right? The people pleaser. He does everything right. He has absolutely no power, no self-confidence. He actually thinks that being good is a good thing and it's going to work things out. But in reality, he's going nowhere. And you know that. If you're a nice guy, you're nodding your head. You're like, help me, Joel, because yes, I'm a recovering nice guy, so I know what that's like. Let's get into some of the top 5 negative emotions that are sabotaging you and your relationship, preventing you from winning ever an argument or just being able to control and dictate the narrative. Number 1, inferiority. Inferiority is this feeling of guilt for your presence. You feel anxiety, baseless, like you don't even matter. This is often associated with shame. I had a lot of shame in my relationship, and I probably still do, but I'm aware of it, and it shows up. And I see that in a lot of men. Shame is one of the lowest vibrational states, by the way. Shame will make you do some crazy stuff. You know that. It'll make you go dark fast. It'll make you apathetic fast. And it'll make you do things like taking your life, like we talked about. Because shame is so deep rooted in our evolution that if you were shamed or ostracized from a group, you were kicked out of the group. That's worse than like being on timeout, right? Or that's worse than being in a fight. Being ostracized from the tribe. Like, you're no longer wanted, you're no longer accepted. We know that one of the biggest evolution markers of human beings is collaboration, and we see this in the blue zones, right? The people that live the longest, that live into their hundreds, it's all about community. And those around community, sometimes they don't even eat the healthiest diets, but because they're around community, we see these people tend to live a lot longer into their hundreds and flourish in beautiful health. Now, shame is the idea that you've done something unacceptable or you are unacceptable. You actually become hypnotized that you're not enough. And these two things, you got to do this right away. Number one, you've got to develop pride for your immutable traits, and you've got to improve on the mutable ones. So your race, your height, the place of origin, all of these for the most part are immutable. Can't change them. How much money you make, how in shape you are, how much you know, how charismatic you are, all those things are under your control. So when you start to be able to change those things, inferiority starts to go away. So be aware of what you can control and what you can't. That's number one, okay? Or number one and two. Now, the second big emotion that we see come up a lot in men that sabotages them, negative emotion, is jealousy. Now, jealousy is basically this feeling of frustration that arises when one person is witnessing something in another person that they do and they feel they can't do themselves. Jealousy is typically will mask itself as many different emotions: rage, anxiety, fear, apathy. And that's the reason why many people have a problem with jealousy, because actually admitting that they're jealous comes with admitting that they feel inferior, which is a really hard pill to swallow. It's much easier to just feel indignant, feel rage, feel hatred, than it is to actually say that I believe I'm unworthy or I feel like I'm unworthy. Instead, I want you to reframe this. Admire the characteristics in someone that makes you feel jealous, because admiration is a virtuous form of envy. So rather than being jealous, just choose to admire your competition. Ask them questions. Appreciate their journey and the ways that they're all different. Remember, when you're jealous, you're just reinforcing to them, which is a frame built around inferiority, and you're just reinforcing it. You're trying to minimize them, only reinforces the frame that they are superior to you. So you got to reframe jealousy. The third big emotion, anger. Anger is a primary emotion, and it dates back to, really, they found out when first it was found in reptiles. Because of the medulla oblongata, that part of the brain where anger occurs, it's the only part of the brain that's actually developed and active in reptiles. Other than fear, anger is probably the second emotion to have evolved. Now, why did it develop so early? It's really simple. It's a motivating emotion. Anger can be positive. We know if it's directed and channeled in the right way, right? We see people when they're angry, they go out and win titles. They go out and win races, right? It fuels them when they're angry to step up and make a stand, to take a stand for something that's not right. Sometimes that's really beneficial to have anger. It's a motivating emotion. You might be angry or pissed off by someone who dismissed you, and that anger fueled you to get up every morning and start running. It changed your identity. We see that in people like David Goggins, right? He's pretty angry. I don't know how long he can sustain it, honestly. I think it was great. It served its purpose, but I think he can let it go. That's just me. But when we're talking about it, let's bring it back to the lens of winning arguments and controlling a conversation. Anger is going to narrow your view. It's going to blind you. You can control and coerce people with anger, but you're going to do it at a really high cost. And usually, it's going to erode the trust of those who actually witness it. So people that display anger because they want compliance, they do it and they want it even from their own self because they don't even have it from them. That's at a deeper level. And so if that compliance is in the best interest of both parties, then it's actually a very powerful use of the emotion, right? If it's benefiting both people. But if it's only in the interest of one party, it's probably going to destroy those social relationships. And it's just going to reinforce that inferiority. Okay? The fourth big one, this is a big one, fear. Fear is the first emotion that's evolved. It's a reaction from our ancient brain to incoming data that something is about to kill the creature, right? So fear is a deep, deep, deep emotion that runs on this foundational background of programming in our brain, right? And we know that. Fear is always running in the background. You shouldn't do this. Don't invest in that. Don't go out with that person. Fear is, I mean, look at what happened in the pandemic. A lot of fear, right? I faced a lot of fear. When I lost my job back in 2021 in the mandates, I had a lot of fear. I had to remind myself, what in my life did I control? What meaningful change could I affect within that locus of control? And that's very, very challenging, but it's very important. You have to stay sold on yourself. The way that you confront fear, it's not by running from it immediately. It's by analyzing it, accepting it, looking at it, and then trying to understand what is it trying to tell you. And then from there, respond to it as one who would respond to any other threat and saying, I see this is happening. What is it trying to tell me? Do I accept what it's trying to tell me? Do I accept this message? Remember, you've got to always be examining your feelings. You've got to be a detective about what's coming up. Feelings, guys, are transient. They come and they go. Like my good friend Ryan Muncie said, he wrote the book, F Your Feelings, because he knows from all his deep study in psychology and neuroscience, feelings come and go. They're transient. But we let them embed these emotional patterns. We create an addiction, an emotional addiction cycle, and then we just stay stuck in it. And it's just a habit loop going over and over again. You want to get out of the fear loop, you got to break those patterns. You got to figure out ways to interrupt it. Now, when we're talking about in the terms of a relationship and being able to maintain control, you need to retain your control and you'll retain your frame. That's why we're going over these emotions. These first two blocks of the evolution is critical. If you don't understand this, you're just going to go use all my other strategies I'm going to teach in the next couple of weeks, and none of them are going to work because you haven't mastered yourself, right? You want to retain control in an argument. You have to retain your frame. You have to retain your energy, your emotions, and then you can actually dictate the way the frame maneuvers. The last one is, you're going to love this. Probably not expecting it, but being in love. Being in love is generally viewed, it's positive, right? But from a frame perspective, it's actually a negative emotional state. Being in love is actually associated with feeling powerless. Falling in love, right? It paints this picture of losing control. Being in love functions as an addiction to a person. It's really like a drug addict supplementing themselves to the demands of their dealer. The person in love, they do whatever they can to appease the object of their desire. The difference between love and being in love is that being in love is built around obtaining and sustaining reciprocity. But this is an anxiety-inducing goal, as other people's feelings are out of your control. And so what happens is you're always trying to appease them. You're always trying to validate and get their love. But that's not something that you can ever get because you can't control their feelings, okay? Their true feelings, your partner's true feelings, are always going to remain somewhat hidden. And that's why there's so much anxiety of like, am I pleasing this person? Am I doing enough? Am I good enough? That will never get you. That's why being in love in this trance-like state is not a good thing. So just as a general rule, I want you guys to think about this. The person who has the strongest frame is the one who cares the least. So the most in love party in this case will be the one who has the weaker frame and advocate for their interests with way less intensity. The first one to actually back down from a fight is that person who begins to experience their life through their lover's demands. They're not living for themselves, but just with the goal of sustaining the relationship. And what you got to realize is that being in love is like a type of trance. You've communicated to yourself over and over and over again that the person that you're in love with is so important to you. You probably have even gone as far to tell yourself that feeling that you're experiencing, it's evidence of your destiny. And you recite this story as if it were like a myth. You tell your friends and your family about it, about your relationship. But you got to know that when you're in love, your frame is being attacked by your own body, by your own neurochemicals, and by your own mind. And so you got to have a strong focus and understand that your feelings are not real. They're simply being influenced by chemicals that are occurring in your brain, and that those chemicals are impelling you to try to create a specific outcome. Doing this is going to be extremely necessary for you to remain objective and actually hold a strong frame. Think about it. People say things all the time like love makes you do crazy things. I see a lot of men for this reason. They just give up their power and they're not even honest with themselves. They start to rationalize their experience with their spouses saying, I'm so lucky to be with her. But the problem with that is believing that you're lucky enough to be with that person. You're actually implying that you're not good enough. And that's why you're so lucky. You're operating from this scarcity mindset. This process is going to make you lose respect for yourself. You speak with less conviction. You feel less creative. You become a character in a movie, but you ain't the director. And for many, the idea of being in love, it's so deeply anchored and rooted in that they start to build a narrative around the idea, and it sticks around for a lot longer, even when the love fades away. I'm going to tell you how crazy love actually is. Now, for some of you, you may not even be in love with the person that you're with right now. But the narrative that's been created, it's so deeply rooted, like I mentioned, that it causes you to stay in a relationship a lot longer simply because you had the feeling of being in love at one time. And remember, the more that you make decisions in the direction of a particular frame, the stronger the frame gets. Talked about this all throughout this video. You are most of the time just reinforcing old beliefs, old patterns, and you got to shift out of them. If you're not aware of these frames and you're not aware of these emotions, you just keep falling back into your normal addiction cycle. I can help you break that and end that self-sabotage for good. I didn't mention this early on in the video, but I do a type of brain pattern assessment. Everybody has 8 specific brain patterns. Once we figure out your brain pattern, we simply just use that information to help you rewire. And I've seen people do this. I did it with myself. I did it with my wife. I did it with my kids. And I've seen people do this in little as 4 months. So if that's something else you're interested in doing, reach out to me. I'm happy to help you guys. This is what I live for and I dream for. And really, my whole job right now, I feel like I am put on this earth to help men build unshakable marriages and deeper connection with your kids. On top of that, my wife is on board. She has a master's degree in counseling, and she is helping the women's side. We're tackling this from all sides, a real holistic approach. I couldn't be more excited, and I want to bring you guys along for the journey. If I can help you in any way, please let me know. And I hope these trainings are uplifting you and impacting you in a positive way in your relationships, in your marriage, in your fatherhood. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. I'm out.